Dear colleagues and guests, it is the 18th of February 2022. Allow me to consider open the meeting of the Dissertation Council for the Defense on the topic Social Perception, Resilience and Coping Strategies of Tuvinian Youth. According to the order of Alexander Gnotov, St. Petersburg University Scientific Secretary, me, Svetlana Gurievna, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology, St. Petersburg University, was appointed the chairperson of this Dissertation Council. And by the same order, the members of the Dissertation Council were approved. Let me introduce them. Doctor of Psychology, Professor, Head of the Department of Psychology of a Person, Hudson University, Elena Korzhova. Good afternoon. In the remote interactive mode, we have got Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology, Leonid Kulikov. Can you hear us? Today in the remote interactive mode, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Social Psychology, St. Petersburg University, Lyudmila Pachebut. Can you see and hear us? In the remote interactive mode, we have got Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor, Head of the Department of Social and Humanitarian Disciplines, Alexander Pastushinya. Can you see and hear us? Mombey Mergenovna, our candidate, is also here with us. And scientific supervisor, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Legal Psychology of the University of Tuva, and the Department of Legal Psychology of Sitnikov Valery, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, University of Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Dear colleagues who are in the remote interactive mode, please switch off your microphones and don't forget to switch them on when the floor is given to you. Audio and video recording is conducted at the website of simultaneous interpretation from English into Russian is also provided. An email address is indicated at St. Petersburg University website. Where you can express your opinion strictly concerning the dissertation. These questions will be forwarded to me by technical services, and I will voice them during the discussion. The questions should be referred directly to the content of the dissertation, and a position and your surname should be indicated. Questions that are not related to the scientific discussion, to the discussion of the dissertation, to the text and assessment of the dissertation itself, will not be voiced. In accordance with the procedure for awarding the academic degree of Candidate of Sciences, academic degree of Doctor of Sciences at St. Petersburg University, approved by local regulations of St. Petersburg University, hereinafter the procedure, a meeting of the Dissertation Council is considered eligible if at least 2/3 of the approved membership of the Council takes part in its work, but not less than 4 people. Our Dissertation Council consists of 5 people. 5 members are present, including 3 members in the remote interactive mode. All members of the Dissertation Council and the applicants are provided with audio-visual contact. Thus, there is a quorum. I ask an employee of the department for supporting the activities of the Dissertation Council, the curator of the defense, to issue an attendance sheet. The procedure of today's meeting of the Dissertation Council, with a total duration of approximately 2 hours, is the following. A brief report of the chairman concerning the documents submitted by our candidate. "15 minutes for a short presentation by the applicant for a scientific degree, reflecting the main points of her research. Approximately 15 minutes. Questions to the applicant strictly according to the report, no more than 2 minutes per question. Answers of the applicant, no more than 15 minutes for all questions. Speeches of all members of the Dissertation Council in turn, with the assessment of the dissertation research, with a summary of their positions, with questions and suggestions for the dissertation. The open discussion, speeches at the request of those present and the defense of the dissertation, with a summary of their positions and or with specific questions and proposals for the dissertation strictly on the topic of research. At the same time, all interested people are requested to register in the registration form and completely introduce themselves before your performance. Presentation by the chairman of questions addressed to the applicant, which came in order to discuss the speech and scientific discussion on the broadcast of the meeting of the Dissertation Council on the website of St. Petersburg University. Answers of the applicant. Discussion of the results of the defense by the members of the Dissertation Council before the open vote, during which the sound of the broadcast is muted. Open roll call, counting of votes by the chairperson of the Dissertation Council with the entry of the results into the minutes of the meeting. Making a decision on awarding or not awarding an academic degree. Concluding remarks of the applicant. Dear colleagues, are there any questions or objections to this regulation? If there are no objections, I will proceed to the implementation of the rules of the meeting. But before, please turn off the sound of your mobile phones. Thank you for understanding. Dear colleagues in the remote interactive mode, please don't switch off your mobile phones in order to connect with you in case of emergency. Okay, let us get down to the realization of our agenda. A brief report of a chairperson. The dissertation of our candidate for the degree of the candidate of Psychological Sciences, specialization 535, Social Psychology, Political and Economic Psychology, on the topic Social Perception, Resilience and Coping Strategies of Tuvian Youth, was accepted for the defense by the order of Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg University. Number of the order 10758/8. Mombey-Mergenovna wrote her dissertation research on the basis of Tuvian State University as a postgraduate student. Her scientific supervisor is Doctor of Psychology, Professor of the Department of Legal Psychology of Tuvian State University, as well as the Department of Legal Psychology, St. Petersburg University of Military of Eternal Defense. A number of publications of the applicant in which the main scientific results of the dissertation are stated. According to the list presented, from the list approved by the Ministry of Education and Science of the Russian Federation, 3 publications. All the documents submitted by the applicants on the information I received from the curator meet the requirements and are stored in the applicant's certification file. Their copies are held by an employee of the Department for Maintenance the Activities of Dissertation Council, who is now in the hall. Before giving the floor to the applicant, dear board members, do you have general questions to the applicant? And if there is a necessity to announce and consider the entire list of documents submitted by the applicant for the defense. And now a brief report of the presentation. You have 15 minutes for your report. Distinguished board members and chairperson, allow me to introduce the results of my dissertation research, social perception, resilience and coping strategies of tuvinian youth, under the guidance of Mr. Syrga. The conditions of the life of modern person are very difficult. They are connected with political, social and economic threats. Modern person have the problems with the problem of global pandemics is very actual, global conflicts, the problem of morale. It is connected with the mortality of people, connected with ecological catastrophes. Klimov, Vodolov, Rubinstein, Kondratiev, Kunitsina, Sitnikov, and other scholars underline that the images stipulate the way of behavior. Social and perceptual images are the regulators of human behavior and interaction with surrounding people. And this research is very specific for Tuvinian Republic. It takes 85th place. In this context, it is very actual, the study of life resistance of the youth, their social perception. The youth is a reproductive part of the region of the country. That's why the problematic is of high importance. Judging from this fact, we formulated the aim of the research and coping strategy of Tuvinian youth. The subject of the research became the social perceptive peculiarities of Tuvinian youth of different gender. The hypothesis of the research is that social perceptive images and coping strategies are interconnected. They are predictors of life resistance and coping strategy of a personality. The indicators of life resistance and coping strategies between youth are different between age, gender, and type of the family. There are some provisions for the defense. Social perceptive images, me, he, images, they can be understood as a special type of predictors of life resistance and a specific behavior of a personality. They can be perceived as a mechanism of forecasting of life resistance among young people adequacy and peculiarities of self-reflection. And there are changes in correlational changes between structures of social and perceptive images of life resistance. The dynamics of structural elements of young youth life resistance, their involvement is significantly different, dependent on the age and so on, and family type, modality, and the connection between eye images and parent images and friends. The high level of involvement and risk acceptance is positively correlates with theoreticians and the image in personality understanding. 471 people were surveyed, representatives of tuvinian youth, aged from 18 to 35, students, working youth, and so on, municipal authorities, and so on. The average age is 26 and 31 years old. Several methods of research were applied. The presence of examples played a great role. We used the range of survey methods and standard mathematical methods of data recycling. These indicators were calculated as the age of respondents. Nominal scale was used. Education, type of family, and so on were taken into account. Correlational analysis was taken into account, factor analysis, and so on. The full list of mathematical data is represented on the slide. Half of respondents had the level of life resistance. Regional stresses, internal stresses were taken into account. They are stipulated from the point of social view and so on. Social and perceptive images are characterized of the age of the youth and so on. Males with high level of involvement are of high importance. From the first to the third aged group, there is a change of correlation connections. The older young people are, the less involvement they have. Correlational connections have the difference dependent on the type of parent family of the youth. Young people from incomplete families have higher involvement indicators. In the group of youth from full families, there is opposite trend, and the key social perceptive indicators of tuvinian youth, there is modality and the presence of connections of the general life resistance is connected with more positive characteristics. The more life resistance is, the more. If you take a different level of life resistance, the higher it is, the more positive characteristics in eye images they have. The high level of involvement, risk acceptance correlates with diverse repertoire. they have from 5 to 6 coping strategies. A person with a life resistance depends on situations. For a person with high level of life resistance, they are characterized of high level of life resistance. For a person with a medium level of life resistance, they have high level of high emotionality of image characteristics. Positive characteristics of eye image and usual repertoire, including confrontation and positive reassessment. On the basis of this data, there is a change of correlational connection, and life resistance of the youth depend on the parent family, on their parent family. Comic repertoire play a great role, and social and perceptive image. These new data from the type and people with the low level of life resistance pose the interest of social and psychological services. They can be used in first prevention. The peculiarities of protective measures should be taken into account. Social and perceptive indicators give new information about life resistance, and practical results of the research is in the fact that the results can be used in consulting the employees of staff services. They allow to understand this data gives the prerequisites of life-resistant behavior. It is necessary to conduct further research which allow to show life resistance of tuvinian youth and life resistant of Asian part of the Russian Federation, and it is necessary to conduct cross-cultural educated in longitude research. And I would like to conclude, and thank you very much for your attention.
Спасибо за ваше выступление. Уважаемые члены диссертационного совета, пожалуйста, вопросы по выступлению, по содержанию диссертации.
Dear board members, do you have any questions concerning the report? Well, I have got a question. Well, the content of your research, please explain and list all the components and your opinion about this fact. And there are a lot of factors which define the life resistance of a person. We define this life resistance as a sustainable personal characteristic with less losses for human health. And what are the basic components? Involvement, control, risk acceptance, they forecast a life resistance in person. It's making difficult to live in complex life situations. There is an impression that they are secondary things, and this definition proves will qualities. They are presented in your research, in your approach, in your understanding. The ability to overcome life difficulties, and so on. We are based on the Leontiev's definitions, and life resistance, life sustainability is the ability of a personality to overcome troubles in life. It is balance, internal balance, which help achieve the success of any activity. Thank you. Distinguished colleagues, do you have any other questions? Elena Yurievna, do you have any questions? No questions? Dear colleagues, if there are any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Please allow me to ask one more question. Life resistance, life sustainability among the youth. I mean, different professional life spheres. You did not reflect it in the provisions of the defense. Life sustainability depending on the professional direction and activity. Alexander Nikolaevich, thank you very much for your question. And indeed, in order to provide representativity of the sampling, we made the sampling which includes people who have different level of education, different spheres of professional activity, including people who are housewives and unemployed. Some parts of our research, they are students, professionally oriented students. In the process, the difference and connection between respondents with different professional activity and different level of education. And these results were found out, and our dissertation Thank you. Are there any other questions? Dear board members? Thank you for the questions which were asked by Alexander Nikolaevich. Our next point, the feedback of our board members with their reviews. I would like to remind you that our candidate may answer after each speaker or after all the speakers. If you don't have any objections, I offer our candidate to answer after all the speakers. Thank you. There are no external reviews. Thank you. Dear colleagues, as all reports were posted at St. Petersburg website, and I will ask you to focus on comments and your remarks, questions and objections. I would like to give the floor to Professor Kulikov. The floor is yours. Well, all in all, I have a negative impression. It may seem that I have a negative impression from this work, but my conclusion is positive. In this dissertation, the task is to understand social and cultural factors concerning life resistance of Tuvian youth, gender and age peculiarities
уровня жизнестойкости тувинской молодежи и семьи
of life resistance of different family types, in-depth analysis of social and psychological factors of life resistance was analyzed. Ethnical and cultural peculiarities of Tuvian teenagers were described, and trait hierarchy was described. A person receiving the definitions such as kind, responsible, caring, sportive, joyful, communicative. It's very interesting in sort of ethnical psychology. There are specific social and cultural connections, and in future other researchers can correlate this data. Parents and representatives of Tuvian youth, the ability to laugh and so on should be taken into account. And girls idealize the image of a friend, male friend. They give more polar characteristics. A friend has many positive qualities, and enemy is a rare thing. Males demonstrate less strictness in their evaluations. They notice in their friends weak sides. The author proposes that negative impressions, they are under the influence that are characteristic of ethnical culture. In the foreground, there is anger, envy, and so on. Positiveness and the ability to have fun are of high importance. taking into account the positive things of the work and conclusions of our candidate. It has a scientific novelty. I have got some questions and remarks. Number one, 80% of Tuvian youth out of 81 people, there is a clear life resistance. Then another percent is low. It is necessary to compare with other parameters, and it is not indicated in the work. Financial stability is closely connected, in our opinion. There are considerable determinations of I personality. The peculiarities of I image, the employment and peculiarities of different age category representatives, school children and applicants are taken into account here. Most part of them, the employees of the structure and feminine. The status of respondent should be discussed additionally. A range of conclusions is based on a specific analysis. Young people with a high level of confrontation states more negative characteristics. Also, representatives of first age group highlights more qualities of social intellect. 1.44,000. I refer to page 45, and there are other pages with low correlation coefficient. And if we speak about the connections, such indicators proves the tendencies of connections, but it should be assessed as a very weak connection, and I want you to explain such approach. Hierarchical structure. To which criteria do you describe behavior? According to which criteria? Psychogeometrical only imagine that you have got portraits of different people and the artist tried to explain the essence of these people, and we want and the correlation of friend and enemy is of 31%. What do you want to explain from the point of view of methodology? Number 5, please specify the interpretation of solution methodology. non-verbal, projective, psychogeometrical part of methodology, about non-verbal correlations and counter correlations, me or he, the image of young people. He image, or there is a most diverse definition. And reverse projections of eye image. They can be both partial and full. If studied material reflects 5 geometrical figures, it is projected to usual human qualities. Number 6, there are some non-correct formulations. For a personality with high level of life resistance, there is a high coping repertoire and more detailed image. Page 166. The image is less emotional. The image can't be considered as a subject. These properties can be a characteristic of a person. Another example, my quotation. We can take into account such factors as positively colored with positive evaluation characteristics and realistic evaluations and fantastic.
Образ человека как
End of quotation. Cognitive education with a subjective nature, and so on. And on the whole, the dissertation, my remarks don't reduce the overall positive impressions from the work. In most cases, my remarks are proved. Empirical material is at high level. The sampling is representative. Adequate statistical methods are used. That's why the dissertation of Mombey on the topic of social the topic social perception, resilience and coping strategies of tuvinian youth conforms with the requirements of the order from November 2021, conforms with the requirements procedure of the awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and our candidate deserve the degree of candidate of psychological sciences.
специальности 535
On specialization 535, social psychology, and point 11 of the order
Благодарим.
was not violated by our candidate. Людмила Почебут, please, the floor is yours. Dear Svetlana Zakhotovna, dear board members, the review on the dissertation, the author of the work explains the actuality of the research, and currently belief in difficult economic, political, and sociological conditions. The understanding of ethical peculiarities of the youth and the content of the mechanisms of social and perceptive behavioral predictors allow to evaluate the phenomenon of life resistance. Eye image, he image of life resistance were analyzed, as well as coping strategy of tuvinian youth. The author offers two hypotheses of the research: the connection of life resistance and coping strategy of a personality. The author formulated provisions for the defense and fully uncovered the results of the research. The research results are closely connected with social and perspective peculiarities and indicators of life resistance of a personality. At all levels of life resistance, this structure and its social and structure is taken into account. Young people are characterized by diverse social images, and they are connected with positive evaluations. Theoretical significance, they obtain data allow to supplement and expand the concept of life resistance, define the connection of with social images. Practical significance, the results of the research can be used in psychological consulting, different areas of practical psychologists. The testing of the work was made on the basis of different continents. There are 12 works published. 3 of them are published in the journals from Higher Attestations Committee. One work is in the journals from Web of Science and Scopus. The author formulated the program of the research and define aims and tasks of the research and find adequate methods for the research. And the methods for the research, the methods of structural images of a person, in adaptation of Leontieva, and special behavior. For 471 respondents were surveyed. Fisher's criteria was applied in the work in the study, and so on. Pearson dispersion analysis of Furman factor analysis was used, and the results of the research proved that have more social and intellectual, emotional and metaphorical characteristics in comparison to eye image. That's why the author developed psychological The role of the family was described and studied. As a factor of life resistance, the author considers the specific strategy, high level of involvement of tuvinian youth. Half the respondents supervise low level of resilience. The dignity of the work is the first. Diverse social and social perspective image of tuvinian youth. Number 2. Taking into account national, ethnical, cultural, and regional peculiarities of tuvinian youth. Number 3. The analysis of parent family and the level of resilience of genders. Number 4. Elaboration of practical recommendations and the glossary. On the whole, the dissertation of Mombey is written in clear scientific language. The literary list consists of 276 sources. The results of the research can be used in practical work of psychologists with the youth. The dissertation of our candidate reflects the main content of the dissertation. The dissertation of our candidate on the topic social perception, resilience and coping strategies of tuvinian youth conforms with the main requirements stated by the order from 19th of November 2021, number 11181/1, procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. Our candidate Mombey deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specialization 535, social psychology, political and economic psychology. Points 1 and 11 of the order were not violated by our candidate. Board member, Doctor of Psychological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Social Psychology, Lyudmila Pochebot. Lyudmila Georgievna, thank you very much for your feedback. Then we go ahead. Now I would like to give the floor to distinguished Elena Korzhova. Distinguished colleagues, according to the results of complex and social research, Tuva is at the final place in terms of lifestyle and level of life, and the youth should be taken into account. The Republic of Tuva has the patriarchal lifestyle, and the youth influences greatly on the lifestyle and specificity of forming social and perceptive images, the repertoire of coping strategy and life resistance of tuvinian youth. And as for the phenomenon of resilience, there is lack of information about the self-assessment and the assessment of other people and psychological peculiarities. The novelty of the research is in multi-layered research of social and perceptive indicators, and in comparative analysis of social and perceptive imaging, coping repertoire, and the structure of psychological protections, representatives of tuvinian youth. On the example of Tuva, the author uncovers the meaning of personal image, the connections between social and perceptive images of life resistance and behavior, protective behavior, the structure of its social and perceptive indicators changes. The extent of significance of these provisions is theoretical and methodological explanations, the clear character of explanation, correct application of statistical data, interpretation of the results. Theoretical significance is defined by the expansions and so on. He image, ideal image, I image, and so on. Practical significance of the dissertation is defined by the opportunity to use psychological data in terms of consulting and psychological diagnostics of tuvinian youth and the prevention of destructive behavior. Dissertation has got traditional structure, and the results are published in 12 printed works. The remarks are of discussion character. The first, my remark, is intersected with the question. The author characterizes the sampling according to gender and age principle, and we can assume that professional and the correlation with overcoming of difficulties. And in order to define the predictors of destructive behavior among tuvinian youth, regressional analysis can be used. The results on factor analysis are described, but there are no tables, and it impedes the evaluation of received results. And number 4, the interest of diversity of procedures and detailed analysis of obtained data, and specific examples allowed to see the meaning of perceptual images among tuvinian youth. And general conclusion, the dissertation is independent, scientific and qualified work in which social and perception images are contained and their interaction in among tuvinian youth. The dissertation of Mombey on the topic social perception, resilience and coping strategies of tuvinian youth conforms with the main requirements stated by the order from the 19th of November 2021. Procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University. Our candidate deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specializations 535, social psychology, political and economic psychology. Points 9 and 11 were not violated. Thank you very much for your feedback. Alexander Pastushin, the floor is yours. Distinguished board members, distinguished chairperson, distinguished candidates. I want to say that the dissertation is of high theoretical and practical actuality. And practical and scientific understanding of these social and psychological phenomena. They are object of the research, and it is very important for young generation, mass information, and the use of other methods of influence. The dissertation conforms with scientific specialization. And first of all, the dissertation is very well explained and has got the adequate methodology of the research. The structure represents logical significance of the problem. It includes empirical research. The complex of methods conforms with the aim of the research. The research is valid and the sampling of respondents is very persuasive, and the results were statistically recycled and they are reflected in the provisions for the defense. All in all, the results of the research have novelty and new data were obtained. First of all, the explanation of social and perceptive images, me and he images, as a predictors of resilience. It is useful to take into account when we want to describe the personality, and the connection between structural components, coping strategies, depending on the type, on the gender and age. Thirdly, such structural component as involvement depending on psychological family, full and incomplete family. Depending on modality, characteristics, and so on. Number 6. Positive correlation activity with the diverse repertoire of these strategies. Along with that, scientific and practical aim was not very well explained. With what scientific and practical aim? The results of the research presented in the conclusion. There are reflected the separate data about qualitative characteristics of studied people, and the whole complex of these characteristics was not covered and explained. And what was the classification of respondents? These data would be would show more considerable contribution into the science. Number 3, in order to raise practical usefulness of the research, it would be better to use the results in more detail. Despite my remarks, there is an overall positive impression from the dissertation, and the research is independent, completed. It is qualified work. Theoretical provisions are explained. They can be qualified as a solution of scientific problem. Conclusion: the dissertation of Mombey on the topic social perception, resilience and coping strategies of tuvinian youth conforms with the main requirements stated by the order from the 9th of November 2021, number 11181/1, procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And our candidate deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences in specialization 535, social psychology, political and economic psychology. Point 9 and 11 were not violated by the candidate. Alexander Nikolaevich, thank you very much for your feedback, and please allow me to voice my feedback. I'm not going to read it out. It was published beforehand at the website of St. Petersburg University. Please let me draw your attention to the fact that today there are radical changes not only in our country but in the rest of the world, and the global problems of humankind connected with survival are of high importance, and there is an interest in potential of modern person, and the study of high novelty, especially in the context of two war. I would like to focus on social, economic, and social psychological moments of the Republic. The value of the work can be rethought. The Republic of Tuva is characterized of high level. It has a high level of subsidies for a long period for the last decades. The Republic is at the final place concerning the quality of life. Social and economic problems are very strong. Uneven correlation of gender correlations. There are more women than men, and it is closely connected with high mortality of men at the age of being employed. Also, I would like to shift to the main content part of the work. It does not influence the meaning of the work. Let me voice my remarks. The terms which are mentioned in the name of the work, they are not very well explained. There is lack. Coping strategies are poorly studied, and there are no modern researches of the correspondent behavior. The author declared about factor analysis, but it was not reflected in the results. Please explain this moment. And number 3, the question is connected with practical recommendations. There is a specific question: for whom are your recommendations aimed, and how they can influence the level of tuvinian youth resilience. Despite the remarks, the dissertation of Mombey on the topic social perceptions, resilience and coping strategies of tuvinian youth conforms with the main requirements stated by the order. Procedure on awarding academic degrees at St. Petersburg University, and our candidate Mombey deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences, specialization 535, social psychology, political and economic psychology. 9 and 11 were not violated by the candidate. Thank you very much. And now we turn to the answers of our candidate. Dear candidate, the floor is yours. Distinguished colleagues, I would like to express my gratitude to you for your attention to our work, for the recommendations, and please allow to answer your remarks. Distinguished Svetlana Zakhotovna, about lack of attention to modern research of coping strategy. These problems are very interesting for me. I published 4 articles about coping strategies among the youth in Tuva. The State University of Kostroma, and I will take your remarks in my further research. Pages 153, 155 of the dissertations are described, and this omission will be taken into account in our research. The problem raised the resilience of young people. They support the School of Future Parents, consulting of the youth and families. There are workshops for volunteers and psychologists, and we elaborated recommendations on the basis of our research, and we are going to create a special program to raise the resilience among citizens. The answers to the remarks of Alexander Nikolaevich, I would like to say that I agree. Alexander Nikolaevich, I agree with you. Gostiev, Zavalova, Klimov, Kondratiev, and other domestic and foreign scientists. The category of image highlights the behavior, and the behavior is planned and future regulative function influences greatly the behavior, and the analysis of resilience problems show that the perception on forming the life resilience is poorly studied. The structure and the content of social and perceptive images are the indicators for resilience and coping strategies. Alexander Nikolaevich, thank you for your important remark. For the level of the problems, and to enter this level, it was necessary to study these qualitative characteristics. It concerns the second point, the results of the research and the application. Thank you for your recommendations. We will take them into account in our further research. We will produce methodological recommendations on the basis of the research of 2020 found the grant on the topic of mid-family was realized. They were consulting schools for future parents were used, and we organized consultings and trainings for stress resistance of young people. As for the remarks of distinguished Elena Yurievna, I agree with you that professional belonging is brings contributions into the area of research. It is of high practical value, but it is not the subject of our research. Thank you for the use of regressional analysis. We will take into account of this research. As for the results of factor analysis, and dear Svetlana Zakhotovna, I agree with your remark concerning the fact that it impedes the understanding of the text of the dissertation, question number 4. And it explains the question. Distinguished Leonid Vasilievich, allow me to answer your question about the necessity to state the numerical sampling. And our research was adapted to the sampling. Modelization was not the aim of our research, and it allows to. We agree that it is necessary to conduct further research. It is necessary to. Leonid Vasilievich, we thank you for your attention to the work. The activity brings the contribution into the connection of images with the overcoming of difficulties, but it was not a subject of our research. It is the subject, it is the aim of our further research. As for the remarks about the correctness of the research, indeed, less than 0.3 coefficient is not adequate, and the sampling, our sampling included the respondents. In future, it is possible to understand low level of correlation. And as for recycling of methodology, categorization is with the help of content analysis. Valery Leonidovich, in the process of which each utterance can be attributed to one or several categories. The positive, neutral, or negative characteristics. Thus, the attitude of respondents is revealed. The definition of subject, and they referred to activity characteristics. As for the fourth and fifth remark, the analysis of non-verbal part of methods allows to speak about the projection type or the lack of social and perceptive projection. The rest of 40% asked to give the instruction in more than 40 languages. As for the remark concerning the correlation of friend and enemy, the images are the same. They are the indicators of value orientations. In many cases, it is the indicator of internal conflict and critical attitude to each other. For the data of nonverbal parameters, the methods of Valery Sitnik, there is a modification of dealing geometrical test, and the refuse of the main principles of the data of personal testing of personal qualities. The analysis of geometrical figures is used for the correlation of the sequence of geometrical figures, illustrating each group of 20 utterances. There are 4 possible variants. The first one is the correlation of the sequence of the first and last figures, which speaks about nonverbal images, and non-correlation of figures, and partial correlation of the sequence when only the first and the last figures correlate. And the last thing, reverse correlation of sequence, and it proves the contradiction of images and reverse proportionality. As for some, non-correct formulations. Thank you for the remark. This image can't be considered as the subject. These properties can be attributed to a person. The formulation should be the following: for the person for high resistance, the image of a person represents cognitive formation, and under the objective evaluations there are more realistic characteristics. We will take it into account. We will take these remarks into account. I would like to thank Lyudmila Georgievna for the interest to our work, for her support, and I would like to thank all board members for your recommendations, which will help to improve our further scientific work. Thank you, dear colleagues, distinguished board members. Are you satisfied with the answers to the questions? Leonid Vasilievich? Thank you. Lyudmila Georgievna? Lena Yurievna? Alexander Nikolaevich? Thank you. I am also satisfied. We continue our work. I want to ask the questions to all those who are present in the hall. There are no volunteers who want to have the floor. Dear curator, are there any external questions? No questions. And now I would like to give the floor to the scientific supervisor, distinguished Valery Leonidovich. Please, a few words about our candidate. No voice in the microphone. First of all, I would like to thank distinguished dear board members. Svetlana Zakhotovna, maybe especially Lyudmila Glebovna Pochebut, and she is suffering from COVID at the moment, and it is the second dissertation defense during her illness. And thank you very much for your presence, for your assessment, for your participation in today's meeting. You got acquainted with the dissertation of Syrga Mergenovna, which was accomplished under my supervision. I want to speak not about the dissertation, but about the personality of our candidate. It was very pleasant and interesting for me to get acquainted with my candidates with the Republic of Tuva. In the remote interactive mode, I got acquainted with the Republic of Tuva in the remote interactive mode while I was the supervisor of this study. For years, Syrga Mergenovna, sorry. Syrga Mergenovna, sorry, but I want to describe positively her path of a researcher. When I got acquainted with Syrga Mergenovna, She was the she taught at the university and her own psychological research. And what I liked from the first distant written acquaintances, she demonstrated her separate artistic approach. She offered her own ideas, and then her hardworking character allowed her to master modern methodology of scientific search and penetrate into the topic and receive real results. She got acquainted with different scientific literature, not only on the profile of the research, I mean philosophical and historical research, and she showed herself as a qualified researcher. She's a hardworking person. She does her best to achieve the aims. She's a constant activist, administrative worker. She's a head of psychological service of the whole Tuvinian University, and she's a mother of 3 children, and she brings them up without a husband. She works, she's overloaded. She takes part in grants. And dear board members, I would like to present your last monograph. It will be interesting. It is close problematics. It concerns retired. It concerns people who are close to retirement. And the main research work was conducted by Syrga Mergenovna. She participated in conferences. We organized them here at St. Petersburg University. Family and children, and her speeches were of high interest. She showed herself as a completed researcher who understands the culture of scientific thinking. He can analyze facts, theoretical provisions. She understands professional tasks very well in the sphere of psychology, pedagogy, and scientific and practical activity. She's very energetic, readiness to interact, principal character, and at the same time she is a kind and sympathetic person, and she is ready to correct her work. She conducted original completed research, but there are a lot of things to rethink. Syrga Mergenovna is without doubt, she's going to continue her research work. It is very useful work. Thank you very much. Valery Leonidovich, thank you very much. Dear colleagues, dear board members, all those who are present here. Then the discussion and the acceptance of questions are finished. Dear board members and candidates, do you have any questions or objections concerning the procedure of the defense connected with the remote interactive mode, in particular? Alexander Nikolaevich, everything is okay? Leonid Vasilievich, everything is okay, the communication is full. Lyudmila Georgievna, there are no objections? There are no objections? Everyone, thank you very much. The next point of the agenda. Dear colleagues, before the beginning of our voting, we have the opportunity to announce the break. Do you think we need such a break to discuss the results of the defense? No, I think we don't need such a break. No, we don't need. Everything is clear. Dear colleagues, it is 3:33 p.m. according to Moscow time. We continue the meeting and proceed to voting. Do you hear everyone correctly? I am raising the question of awarding our candidate of a degree, scientific specializations 535, social psychology, political and economic psychology, on an open roll call. I remind you that voting for, every board member agrees that point 11 was not violated by our candidate. In the dissertation, the candidate for a scientific degree has to refer to the author and the source of borrowing materials or individual results. When using in the dissertation the results of scientific papers performed by the applicant for a scientific degree personally or in a co-authorship, the applicant for an academic degree is obliged to note this circumstance in the dissertation. I remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Council on the issue of awarding an academic degree is considered positive if more than half, but at least 3 members of the Dissertation Council who participated in the meeting voted for it, in accordance with clause 23 of the procedure. Leonid Kulikov, your opinion? Please switch on your microphone. I think that Syrga Mergenovna deserves the degree of the candidate of psychological sciences. My opinion is for. Distinguished board member Lyudmila Pachebut. Your opinion, yes. I think it deserves. Elena Korzhova, your opinion? I support the study. I vote for. Dear board member Professor Alexander Pastushenya, your opinion? I am for the degree. And me, Svetlana Gurieva, my opinion is for. Distinguished colleagues, dear those who are present, out of 5 participated in the vote, 5 voted for, no one against or abstained from vote. The decision on awarding the academic degree of the candidate of psychological science in the scientific specialization, social psychology, political and economic psychology was accepted unanimously. I would like to express my gratitude to the chairperson, to the board members for your attention to my research. I thank St. Petersburg University for the opportunity to have the floor here. I thank the Department of Social Psychology, and special thanks to my scientific supervisor, Mr. Sitnikov. And I would like to thank I would like to thank my mother and children for patience, motivation during these years. Thank you very much. And on our behalf, we congratulate you, and we wish you every success. Our congratulations. I join to congratulations, and board members join the congratulations. Our congratulations, dear colleagues. The meeting is declared closed. Thank you very much for the work. Please switch off the live broadcast of the meeting. Goodbye.